Hello everyone, it's nice to meet you here. So before I explain my paper, I would like to introduce myself to you. My name is Han Ma and I'm from Harbin, which is the north province of China. I'm now doing my junior in the integrative studies and I enjoy doing sports a lot. So it will be my pleasure to be friends with you uh, who share the same interests with me. Okay, then I'll go to the introduction of my paper. There are three parts of it. My own definition of the health communication, the two most important challenges in the health field from my perception, and then the one topic which is the most interesting for me. So first, I will give my own definition of health communication. I define it as the transmission of message regarding the dynamic state of physical, psychological, and social well-being through multiple channels and various contexts between different subjects. Evidently, there are two crucial factors which need to be considered in this definition. First of all, communication is essentially the one-way or mutual transmission of messages whose content and efficiency will be influenced by the subjects. Communicating channels and different contexts. Thus, the essential of the communication and the factors which will potentially influence the communication are considered in the definition. What's more, since health practically has meanings in multiple dimensions, the three most common dimensions have therefore been cited in the definition as physical, psychological, and social, and the word dynamic has been added particularly considering that the human body is in an active balance as opposite to an changed state. Then I'm going to talk the two challenges which seems the most important from my point of view. The first one is the aging population, and my reasons are as follows. First of all, with the predictable growing tendency of the aging populations in the US, the old adults are going to be a considerable part of the whole population, which means that more attention needs to be paid on their physical, psychological, and social well-being in order to uphold an ordered society. What's more, as is more commonly seen that the old generation is more likely to suffer from diseases compared with the general youngsters. The state of this special group is ought to be the priority of the researchers regarding health communication. Moreover, it is also worth mentioning that the age gap between the old patients and those doctors and nurses who are relatively younger are also posing obstacles in terms of their communication. The age gap, to be more practical, include the initiative to choose easier words, which will be either to understand for the old adults, the willing of giving confidence to those doctors who are younger than them for the old patients, and so forth. In a nutshell, both the necessity and the importance of better health care of old patients can justify the importance of challenge of the health communication of aging population. And then the tension between traditional and new approach to health is the second challenge, with the most important in my opinion. The biggest tension between the traditional and the new approach may be mainly caused by the argument regarding what is the best for the patient. It seems to be an undoubtable evidence that a considerable portion of those experts in the medical fields has have worked for a long period for the cure for those diseases. Therefore, it turns out that their patients may suffer from even serious physical pain when being treated, and the psychological pain, which can be more harmful than the physical ones. To list the radiation treatment, which is the common approach for cancers, as an example, one of the side effects is the loss of hair, which may have enormous adverse effects on patients' social life, and inner confidence, which may conversely impose a bad effect on the physical treatment. However, in a nutshell, the gap between the efforts which have been made by medical workers and the dissatisfying outcome may derive from the lack of communication between patients and their doctors. Thus, that may be the reason that the new approach of health pay increasingly more attention on the psychological state of their patients. Finally, I would like to talk the topic of the provider-patient communication, which I'm interested in the most. The reason why I view this is the most interesting topic among the others is that the tension between providers and patients is becoming increasingly stern in the Chinese society because of multiple reasons. The most important from my perception might be the gap between the expected medical efficiency of the patients and the real outcome, which might be dissatisfying. Thus, the real turnout is actually below the expected one. The tension between providers and patients is going to enhance, however, since it's a pity that although the medical technology has developed immensely in the past decades, there still exists some uncertain factors which makes guarantee the recovery for every patient almost impossible. The communication between the patients and providers is indispensable in easing the tension. This topic is particularly interesting to me because there are so many factors to be considered when it comes to the provider patient communication, such as the disparity of the personal quality of both sides, the morality of providers, and the construction of the competence in between, the orientation of the mass media, and so forth. To be more practical, a large disparity of the educated level between providers and patients can cause misunderstandings in between, which makes the construction of competence difficult. What's more, the reportage of the mass media focusing on what's happening in hospitals makes hospital a hot pot point in the Chinese society. However, however, on one hand, the biased orientation of the mass media, which often regards the patients as an underprivileged group, makes an equal relationship between the providers and the patients difficult to realize. But on the other hand, the reportage of the fact that some providers are taking kickbacks from the medicine merchants does have a positive effect on the improvement of the medical service quality. Thus, how to ease the provider-patient's communication using the mass media is also an issue important in the topic. In a nutshell, the provider-patient communication is interesting to me because it's an indispensable part of improvement of the medical service, and there exists loads of factors to be considered in terms of this topic.